Have you ever imagined being completely alone in a dark, silent place and suddenly realizing you're not so alone after all? It was exactly midnight when Marcus Thompson descended the creaking stairs leading to the abandoned basement of Roosevelt Middle School in Oregon. The school had been empty for hours. Every employee, every student, every trace of human life had vanished with the sunset. Only Marcus remained, the invisible janitor, that 58-year-old man everyone sees walking down the hallways but no one really knows. He dragged the broom across the cold concrete floor, the sound echoing off the damp walls, and then heard something dragging back. He stopped, his heart racing. He waited. He listened again. Marcus froze in place, every muscle in his body tense like a violin string. That wasn't an echo. Echoes don't move independently. Echoes don't breathe. And echoes, definitely, don't cry. What came next made Marcus's blood run cold. A faint, almost inaudible voice whispered, "His name from the darkness. How was that possible? Who could have known he was there?" Stay with me until the end of this story, because what Marcus discovered in that forgotten basement wasn't just a secret buried for decades. It was a life that depended on him to survive. This is the true and harrowing story of how a lonely janitor, simply doing his routine job on an ordinary Friday night, became the last hope for someone the world had forgotten. Have you ever had that feeling that something is terribly wrong even when everything seems normal? Marcus had that feeling that night, and thank God he didn't ignore it. What you're about to discover may surprise you, shock you, and perhaps even change the way you see the ordinary people you encounter every day. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes, they wear janitor uniforms and carry brooms instead of swords. But before revealing exactly what Marcus found in that dark corner of the basement, you need to understand who this man was, why he was there, and how a decision made in seconds would save not only a life, but also unravel one of the most disturbing secrets that small Oregon town had ever faced. Marcus Thompson wasn't the kind of man who appeared in school photos or was mentioned at meetings. He was part of the structure, like the walls and the ceiling, essential but invisible. For 15 years he had cleaned those same hallways, locked those same doors, turned off those same lights. Since losing his wife Linda to cancer 3 years ago, Roosevelt Middle School had become more than his job. It was his refuge. In those silent hallways at night, he didn't need to pretend he was okay. He didn't need to smile when he didn't feel like it. He could simply exist, sweep, clean, and find a strange peace in the predictable routine. But that Friday in October, Principal Patterson had left a note on his desk. "Marcus, please clean the basement this weekend. We'll need space for the new files on Monday." He sighed as he read the note. The basement, that place forgotten by God and man, where dusty boxes held records of students who were already grandparents, where broken equipment went to die in peace. No one had gone down there for months, maybe years. And you, have you ever had to face that place in your house or workplace that everyone avoids? That dark, abandoned corner, full of things that nobody wants to touch? Leave a comment below telling us the strangest or most unexpected thing you've ever found while cleaning like this. Because Marcus's story will make you rethink every dark corner you've ever ignored. And if this story is affecting you, if you're already feeling that chill down your spine, leave a like now. This helps more people discover real stories like this one, which remind us that reality is sometimes much more intense than any fiction. And if you want to keep seeing stories that restore faith in humanity, that show ordinary people doing extraordinary things, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your participation here is what keeps this work going. It's what allows stories like Marcus's to reach thousands of people who need to be reminded that goodness and courage still exist in this world. I know this kind of content resonates with you, so stay with me until the end because you haven't seen anything yet. Going back to that night, Marcus put on his work gloves, filled the bucket with water and detergent, gathered brooms, cloths, and his most powerful flashlight. It was almost 11:30 at night when he finally finished cleaning the last corridor on the second floor. The school was immersed in that heavy, almost oppressive silence that only empty places can produce. Marcus picked up the rusty key that opened the basement door and descended the first step with a deep breath. The air was completely different down there, colder, denser, heavy with dampness and abandonment. The wooden staircase groaned beneath his feet as if protesting against being awakened after so long being forgotten. Each step echoed strangely, amplified by the concrete walls that seemed to swallow any living sound. The flashlight cut through the darkness in thin slices of yellowish light, revealing cobwebs that hung from the ceiling like ghostly curtains. You know that feeling when you're entering a place you don't want disturbed? Marcus felt it immediately. It wasn't exactly fear. It was more of an instinctive respect for the unknown. He had learned, throughout his life, that sometimes places hold memories, and that basement had decades of them accumulated in every dusty corner. Boxes stacked to the ceiling formed labyrinthine corridors, broken chairs, tables without legs, cracked blackboards, rusty sports trophies from 1980s championships. Everything there was a graveyard of objects that had once been important to someone. Marcus started in the corner closest to the stairs, moving boxes, sweeping the floor covered in a thick layer of dust. That had probably been there since before he was born. The work was mechanical, almost meditative, pushing, sweeping, cleaning, organizing. His mind wandered while his hands worked. He thought of Linda, as always, how she would love to know that he still kept the house clean as she taught him, how she would have laughed at him for cleaning an abandoned basement on a Friday night instead of watching the game with the friends he no longer had. Loneliness had become his constant companion for the past 3 years. It wasn't the bad kind of loneliness, the kind that hurts and suffocates. It was more like a heavy blanket you get used to carrying. Marcus had made peace with his quiet life. He found purpose in the little things, keeping the hallways sparkling, ensuring the children had a clean environment to learn in, being the last person to turn off the lights and the first to turn them on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It was real. And for Marcus, that was enough. But the truth is, life has a peculiar way of shaking us up when we're too comfortable in our routine. Transformation never knocks on the door announcing its arrival. It simply bursts forth, usually at the most unexpected moments, completely changing the trajectory of our decisions and revealing versions of ourselves we didn't even know existed. Marcus was about to discover this in the most intense way possible. He had just moved a particularly heavy stack of boxes labeled Records 1982-1985 when he heard it. A sound, subtle, almost imperceptible, as if something had moved on the other side of the basement. Marcus stopped, the broom suspended in mid-air, all his senses heightened. He waited. Silence. Maybe it was just a rat, he thought. Old basements always have rats. He swept again, the sound of the bristles against the concrete breaking the oppressive silence. And then he heard it again, clearer this time, a scraping sound, metal against stone, coming from the darkest and furthest corner of the basement, where the boxes were stacked chaotically, creating almost a solid wall. Marcus's heart began to beat faster. It wasn't fear yet. It was that primal warning we all have, that ancient instinct that tells us when something isn't right. He gripped the broom handle tighter and began to walk slowly toward the sound, the flashlight trembling slightly in his other hand. The journey for the next 10 meters seemed to last an eternity. Each step revealed a new piece of that hidden truth that was about to shatter his tranquil reality into 1,000 pieces. Marcus pointed his flashlight directly at the corner, where the sound was coming from, but all he could see was a confusing mountain of faded cardboard boxes and broken furniture piled up haphazardly. The flashlight's light barely penetrated the chaotic tangle. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing pulse pounding in his ears. It was probably just a raccoon or an opossum that had found a way in, he thought, trying to logically convince himself of what his instincts were already questioning. Animals don't make such deliberate noises. Animals don't stop when you stop. He took a few more steps, the broom still firmly in his hands, as if it were an improvised weapon. The temperature seemed to have dropped a few degrees in that particular part of the basement. The air was heavier, almost solid, laden with an inexplicable tension that made every hair on his body stand on end. Marcus had never been superstitious. Linda always joked that he was too practical to believe in ghosts, but at that moment, alone in that suffocating darkness, he perfectly understood why people invented stories about haunted places. Some spaces simply carry a different energy, something that defies all rationality. Then the sound returned, louder now, unmistakable. It wasn't the scraping of paws or claws, it was something being dragged, something heavy moving against a hard surface. And then, immediately afterward, came another sound that made Marcus's blood literally freeze in his veins. A groan, low, muffled, but unmistakably human. That sound carried pain, despair, a silent plea that had pierced through decades of dust and neglect, and struck Marcus right in the chest like a punch. All the decisions we make in life come down to crucial seconds. Those crossroads moments where you can turn left or right, you can move forward or backward, you can act or pretend you saw nothing. Marcus was exactly at that point. Every rational fiber of his being screamed at him to go up those stairs, lock the basement door and call the police, to let trained professionals handle whatever was happening down there. But there was something stronger than reason at that moment. There was that groan, that pure manifestation of human suffering that cannot be ignored by anyone who still has a shred of humanity in their heart. Marcus began moving the boxes, first carefully, then more urgently, stacking them to the side, creating a path through that accidental barricade of forgotten objects. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from pure adrenaline. The impact of that impending revelation was already reverberating through his body before his mind even fully grasped what was happening. Dust exploded in dense clouds with each box moved, entering his lungs, making him cough. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. As he removed the obstacles, Marcus began to notice something strange. The boxes closest to the wall weren't there by chance or carelessness. They had been deliberately, strategically positioned to hide something. Someone had built that barrier on purpose. Someone didn't want that specific part of the basement to be discovered. The mindset behind that organization wasn't negligence. It was intentional concealment. It was the backstage of something far more sinister than simple, disorganized storage. When he finally managed to remove the last boxes, Marcus saw the concrete wall stained with damp and mold. For a moment he thought he had gone mad, that his imagination had played a cruel trick on him. But then his eyes caught something, a very thin vertical line in the wall, almost imperceptible, camouflaged by decades of accumulated dirt. He ran his fingers along the crack and felt it. There was an opening, a door, so well hidden that you could look directly at it and see nothing but solid wall. Marcus's heart raced. His hands found an edge, a fulcrum, and he pulled with all his might. The door resisted, held together by rust and time, but then gave way with a sharp creak that echoed throughout the basement like a cry of agony. What Marcus saw when that door swung open completely shattered any notion of reality he had built up in his 58 years of life. If you've been following every second of this journey, every jolt of tension, then you understand that some stories need to be told, no matter how disturbing they are, because they reveal truths about courage and humanity that we all need to know. Subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will completely change everything you thought you knew about this story. Behind that door was a tiny, claustrophobic space, no bigger than a broom closet. The beam of light from Marcus's flashlight revealed something that took his mind a few precious seconds to fully process. Huddled on the cold concrete floor, shrouded in shadows and dirt, was a human figure, a young girl, maybe 16, maybe 17. Her hair was tangled, plastered to her dirty face. Her clothes were torn and stained, but it was her eyes that broke something inside Marcus. Huge, wide eyes, gleaming with a terrifying mixture of utter fear and desperate hope. Eyes that had seen things no human being should see. Marcus staggered backward, tripping over his own feet, almost dropping the flashlight. His brain refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be real. Not there. Not at that school where he had worked for 15 years. Not in that basement, just a few meters from where children played and teachers taught every day. The transformation of his ordered reality into a living nightmare happened in fractions of a second. Everything he believed about that place, about safety, about normality, crumbled like a house of cards. The girl didn't move. She stood there, huddled up, trembling violently despite it not being that cold. Her lips were cracked, dry, with bloodstains at the corners. Her hands, those pale hands Marcus had seen moving through the crack, were scratched and dirty, her nails broken. There were marks on her wrists, purple and red, unmistakable signs that she had been tied up. The visual impact of that scene was so brutal that Marcus felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the damp wall, trying to regain control of himself, trying not to vomit right there. How long had she been there? Days? Weeks? The question exploded in her mind with devastating force. How was this possible? How could someone be imprisoned there without anyone knowing, without anyone hearing, without anyone noticing? The school had alarms, security cameras in some hallways, people coming and going every day. And yet, here she was, hidden in the background of visible reality, imprisoned in a hidden truth that existed parallel to the normal world above. Marcus finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse and trembling. My God, what happened to you? Who did this?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She just kept looking at him, as if trying to determine if he was real or just another cruel hallucination. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again, and this time Marcus heard a whisper so faint he had to lean in to understand. "Water, please." Something broke inside Marcus at that moment. All the paralysis, all the shock, everything was swept away by an overwhelming wave of purpose. He took the water bottle he always carried on his belt and knelt in the doorway of that tiny room, carefully extending it. The girl looked at the bottle as if it were the most precious object in the universe. Her hands trembled so much as she took it that Marcus had to help her hold it, guide it to her lips. She drank in desperate gulps, water dribbling from the corners of her mouth, running down her dirty neck. She choked, coughed violently, but continued drinking as if it were the last water she would ever have in her life. While she drank, Marcus was already pulling his cell phone from his pocket, his fingers clumsily trying to dial 911. But before he could, the girl dropped the bottle and grabbed his arm with surprising force for someone in her state. Her eyes widened even more, pure panic etched on her face. "No," she whispered urgently, her hoarse voice gaining volume for the first time. "He'll know. He always knows when someone's coming. Please, you don't understand. He works here." Marcus's heart literally stopped for a second. Her words echoed in the confined space like a gunshot. He works here. Someone from that school, someone Marcus saw every day, greeted in the hallways, maybe even considered a colleague. Someone had built that prison, had hidden that door, had imprisoned that girl there, and continued to circulate freely throughout the building. The revelation of that truth was like receiving a direct blow to the stomach. Marcus felt the world spin around him. His legs almost gave way again, but he forced his body to remain firm. He needed to stay calm. He needed to think clearly, even when every thought felt like a desperate scream echoing inside his skull. "He works here." The girl's words reverberated like a funeral bell. How many people worked at Roosevelt Middle School? 50, 60. Teachers, assistants, cleaning staff, kitchen staff, administration. Any one of them could be the monster responsible for this. Any familiar face could hide a truth so horrifying that Marcus could barely process it. He slowly put the phone away, his hands still trembling uncontrollably. The girl released his arm, but her eyes didn't leave Marcus's face for a second, as if she were trying to read in him some assurance that she wouldn't be betrayed again, that this time someone would truly help her. Marcus knelt completely in the doorway of that tiny room and tried to keep his voice as calm as possible, although he felt as if his heart would explode at any moment. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, as if she had forgotten she had a name, that she had once been a person with an identity before becoming just a prisoner in that dark hole. "Sarah," she finally whispered. "Sarah Mitchell." The name struck Marcus like lightning. Sarah Mitchell. He had seen that name. Where? When? And then the memory came with crystal clarity, the posters plastered all over the school the previous week. A young face smiling in a school photo, neat hair, bright eyes, so different from the broken girl in front of him. Missing in giant red letters, emergency meetings with the police, teachers crying, students in shock. Everyone thought Sarah had run away from home, that she was somewhere far away, maybe in another city, maybe hurt, maybe worse. But she was here. She had been here all along, just a few meters from where hundreds of people walked every day. Marcus felt such intense anger rising in his chest that he could barely control it. How could someone be so calculating, so coldly cruel? What kind of sick mentality could build a secret prison, kidnap a teenage girl during school hours, and then continue to circulate normally through the hallways, perhaps even participating in the search, feigning concern while the victim was literally under everyone's feet? The psychological impact of that discovery was almost unbearable. Marcus had worked at that school for 15 years. He knew every corner, every room, every person, and yet this parallel reality, this horror behind the scenes existed without him having the slightest suspicion. "How long have you been here, Sarah?" Marcus asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Sarah closed her eyes, tears finally streaming down her dirty face, leaving clean trails on her grimy skin. 6 days, she whispered. "It's been 6 days. 6 days, a whole week of hell. Alone in that dark hole, not knowing if anyone would come, not knowing if she would see the sun again." Marcus had to swallow the lump that formed in his throat. He carefully extended his hand. "Sarah, I'm going to get you out of here, I promise, but you need to tell me. Who did this? Who is he?" Sarah trembled violently, her eyes filling with a terror so profound that Marcus could almost physically feel it. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She struggled to say the name as if pronouncing it might summon him right there, materialize the nightmare before her. Finally, in an almost inaudible whisper, she said, "Mr. Brennan, the math assistant." Marcus's world came to a complete standstill. Mr. Brennan, James Brennan, a man of perhaps 35, always polite, always with a friendly smile. Marcus saw him often, sometimes staying late grading papers, always volunteering for school events, beloved by the students. The image of the man in glasses and a beige sweater explaining equations on the board simply didn't fit with the monster who had done this. But that was precisely the most terrifying truth about predators. They don't look like monsters. They look normal, reliable, ordinary. Marcus helped Sarah to her feet with extreme care. She could barely stand. Her legs had become too weak after days in that position. He took off his work coat and placed it over her shoulders, which were much larger than her frail body. "Let's get out of here now," Marcus said with determination. "He won't hurt you anymore. I won't let him." But even as he spoke these words, a terrifying question hammered in his mind. Where was Brennan now? Could he still be in the building? The decisions of the next few minutes would determine not only Sarah's fate, but potentially Marcus's as well. And if your heart is racing now, feeling every second of this impossible tension, then you understand the courage that is about to be tested. Subscribe to the channel because the confrontation that follows will leave you breathless. Marcus held Sarah tightly as they began to climb the wooden steps that creaked under their weight. Each step was a struggle. Sarah's legs trembled so much that she almost collapsed with each movement. Marcus supported her with one arm around her waist, practically carrying her weight, while his other hand held the flashlight that illuminated the path. With each step, Sarah sobbed softly, her words broken between gasping breaths. It was as if now that she was finally safe, all the pent-up pain of those 6 days of horror was exploding at once. "He called me to help with some books," Sarah whispered, through tears as they went upstairs. "He said he needed someone to carry boxes from the basement to his room. I wanted to help. He was always so nice to everyone." Her voice broke completely. "When we came down, he offered me water. I drank it. And then everything went blurry. I woke up in that hole, tied up. He said no one would look for me there, that everyone would think I'd run away because I'd argued with my mother the week before. He knew that. He knew everything about me. Marcus felt bile rise in his throat. The coldness of the planning, the calculated manipulation, the intimate knowledge of Sarah's inner workings, all of this revealed a predatory mentality that had likely been cultivated for years. How many times had Brennan done this before? How many other Sarahs had existed that no one had found? The transformation of a seemingly respectable teaching assistant into a systematic predator was the kind of hidden truth that made you question absolutely everything about the people around you. They finally reached the top of the stairs. Marcus opened the basement door and the school hallway stretched out before them, illuminated only by the emergency lights that cast a ghostly greenish glow over everything. Never had that familiar hallway seemed so menacing. Every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. Marcus quickly guided Sarah down the hallway, his eyes scanning every corner, every door, every window. His janitor's room was on the ground floor, just 50 meters away. A safe place where he could lock the door, call the police, and wait for help to arrive. He came every night, Sarah continued, as if she needed to purge all that poison from within her. Always around midnight, he brought food, water. He would sit there watching me, talking about how special we were, how no one would ever understand us. I begged, I screamed, but no one heard. The basement is too deep. Sounds don't travel up. She trembled violently. Tonight he said he would come later, said he had something special planned. Marcus quickened his pace, practically dragging Sarah along now. The urgency of the situation weighed on him like a ton of bricks. If Brennan planned to return that night, he could show up at any moment. And if he discovered that Sarah had escaped, that someone knew his secret, Marcus didn't even want to think about the desperate decisions a cornered man might make. They passed through the dark library, the teacher's lounge, the rows of lockers that stretched along the walls like silent soldiers. They were only 20 meters from Marcus's room when Sarah froze completely, her body stiffening like stone. "Wait," she whispered, absolute terror returning to her eyes. "Did you hear that?" Marcus stopped, holding his breath, all his senses on high alert. In the oppressive silence of the empty school, he heard it. Footsteps. Someone was in the building. Someone was moving down the parallel hallway. Calm, measured steps of someone who knew the place well and was in no hurry. Sarah began to tremble so violently that Marcus had to hold her tighter to keep her from falling. "It's him," she whispered, almost voicelessly. "I recognize the footsteps. He always walks like this. He's here." Marcus's heart pounded frantically. He looked around desperately, searching for options. His room was too far away. They would be seen before they got there. Going back to the basement wasn't an option. There was an unlocked classroom a few feet to the left. Marcus made an instant decision. He pulled Sarah into the room, closed the door as quietly as possible, and locked it from the inside. The room was plunged into total darkness, only the moonlight faintly filtering through the windows. Marcus guided Sarah behind the professor's desk, where they both crouched down, trying to control their gasping breaths. He finally picked up his cell phone, his hands trembling so much he almost dropped it. He dialed 911 with clumsy fingers. The phone rang once, twice. "Answer, answer, answer," Marcus whispered mentally. Outside, footsteps were getting closer, echoing down the hallway with terrifying regularity. And then the doorknob of the room began to turn slowly, testing, checking. The 911 operator's voice came through the phone, professional and calm. "What is your emergency?" Marcus whispered as quietly as possible, his words rushing out urgently. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm at Roosevelt Middle School. I've found Sarah. Mitchell, the missing girl. She's been kidnapped and is being held here. The kidnapper is in the building now. We need help immediately." On the other end of the line, he could hear the sound of rapid typing, the instant change in the operator's tone as she realized the gravity of the situation. "Sir, please keep the line open. Police units are on their way. What is your exact location in the building?" Marcus was about to answer when the doorknob stopped turning. The footsteps in the hallway faded, but not by much. Whoever was out there was still close. Marcus could feel it. Sarah clung to his back, her whole body trembling against him, her breath coming in short, gasping bursts that Marcus feared could be heard through the door. He kept the phone pressed to his ear with one hand, while the other gripped the handle of a broom he'd grabbed before hiding. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was what he had. And if necessary, he would use it. "We're in room 17, West Corridor." "First floor," Marcus whispered into the phone. "Please hurry, he knows we're here, it's only a matter of time until—" He didn't finish the sentence because at that exact moment he heard a voice on the other side of the door. A voice he instantly recognized, calm, almost friendly, with that polite tone that always characterized James Brennan. "Marcus, is that you in there?" The question floated through the air like poison disguised as honey. "I saw the light from your flashlight. Is everything all right? Do you need help with anything?" Marcus's blood literally froze in his veins. The naturalness of that voice, the perfect performance of concern, the way Brennan pretended it was just another casual encounter between colleagues, it was terrifying in its normality. That was the mask predators wear so well, the ability to appear completely ordinary, even while hiding monstrosities behind the scenes of their seemingly normal lives. Marcus didn't answer. He remained completely still, his hand gripping the broom handle until his knuckles turned white. Sarah had buried her face in Marcus's back, stifling a sob that threatened to escape. Her hands gripped his shirt so tightly he could feel her nails through the fabric. The 911 operator continued speaking softly on the phone. "Mr. Thompson, the units are 4 minutes away. Are you safe where you are? Can you stay where you are?" Marcus couldn't answer without revealing his position, so he just kept holding the phone, hoping she could hear everything that was happening. "Marcus, I know you're there," Brennan's voice continued, and now there was a subtle shift in tone. The friendliness was beginning to crack at the edges, revealing something darker underneath. "Look, I don't know what you think you know, but we need to talk like adults. Open the door. Let's resolve this civilly." The psychological impact of hearing those words, the attempt at manipulation even in that extreme situation, revealed the depth of Brennan's distorted mindset. He truly believed he could still control the narrative, that he could still persuade and manipulate his way out of this. Marcus finally found his voice, keeping it steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. "The police are coming, Brennan. I already called. They're on their way. It's over." There was a moment of absolute silence on the other side of the door. A silence so heavy and dense it seemed to have physical substance. And then Brennan laughed. It wasn't a loud or hysterical laugh. It was a low, almost sad laugh from someone who had just realized the game was over but wasn't yet ready to accept defeat. "You shouldn't have gotten involved in this, Marcus," Brennan said, and now all pretense of civility had vanished from her voice. "She's mine. You don't understand. Nobody understands. I took care of her. I protected her." The door began to tremble. Brennan was trying to force it open. The lock was strong, but how long would it hold? Marcus pulled. Sarah further away, positioning himself between her and the door, broom raised ready. Every muscle in his body was tense, prepared to fight if necessary. At 58 he wasn't young, he wasn't as strong as he used to be, but he had something Brennan didn't. The strength that comes from protecting the innocent, the courage that arises when you're not fighting for yourself, but for someone who can't defend themselves. This transformation from invisible caretaker to determined protector happened in seconds, shaped by necessity and the conscious decision that there were lines that couldn't be crossed without resistance. The door trembled again, harder this time, and Marcus braced himself for the inevitable impact. And if you're on edge right now, holding your breath along with Marcus, then you're part of this community that values real courage in the face of real evil. Subscribe to the channel because what happens in the next few seconds will define everything. The latch finally snapped shut with a loud metallic crack, and the door burst open. James Brennan stormed in like a hurricane, his normally calm eyes now wild and glazed, his face contorted in a mask of despair and fury that Marcus had never seen on any human being. His glasses were crooked on his face. The beige sweater he always wore was disheveled, his hair a mess. It was as if the veneer of normalcy had been completely ripped away, revealing the creature that had always been hidden beneath. "Where is she?" Brennan shouted, his eyes sweeping the room until they landed on Sarah, huddled behind Marcus. "Sarah, you can't do this. You don't understand what we have." Marcus didn't think. He didn't calculate. He didn't weigh options. His body simply reacted with a protective instinct so profound that it transcended any rational consideration. He stepped forward and shoved Brennan with all his might, using his own body weight to throw the younger man against the hallway wall. Brennan slammed his back against the metal lockers with a hollow, deafening sound. "Run, Sarah!" Marcus shouted without taking his eyes off Brennan. "Run now!" Sarah hesitated for only a fraction of a second, her survival instincts finally overcoming the paralyzing fear. She ran out of the room, her weak legs stumbling but keeping her upright, running down the hallway toward the main exit. Brennan tried to follow her, pushing Marcus back, but Marcus grabbed his arm, holding on tightly. They fought there in the hallway, an awkward and desperate struggle that was anything but cinematic. It was brutal, chaotic, two men pushing and grabbing each other, tripping over their own feet. "She's mine!" Brennan screamed, saliva flying from his mouth, his eyes completely disconnected from reality. "I took care of her. I protected her. You can't take her from me. Nobody can." The full impact of that man's delusion, the completely distorted mentality that transformed horror into love, abuse into care, was now on full display. There was no more mask, no more performance. It was the hidden truth finally exposed in all its monstrosity. And then, tearing through the night like the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard, came the sirens. Multiple sirens, growing louder with each passing second, converging from all directions. Red and blue lights began flashing through the school windows, flooding the hallways with that pulsating glow of imminent salvation. Brennan froze, her eyes widening as she realized what it meant. The game was over. The years-long journey of building her secret prison, maintaining its perfect facade, had come to an end. He let go of Marcus and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Officers were already entering through the main and side doors, their boots clattering against the waxed floor. Authoritative voices echoing commands. "Police! Hands on your heads! Now!" Brennan stopped in the middle of the corridor, spinning like a cornered animal, searching for an exit that didn't exist. Marcus leaned against the wall, panting, watching the final transformation, the predator becoming the prey. Two officers advanced swiftly, weapons drawn, and threw Brennan to the ground with professional force. Handcuffs clicked onto his wrists as he screamed, an incoherent torrent of denials and accusations and distorted declarations of love. "You don't understand. I love her. This is a mistake. Marcus, tell them it's a mistake." But Marcus said nothing. He just watched. As they led the man away, still screaming, still denying, still utterly unable to see the reality of what he had done. An officer approached Marcus, her face showing professional concern. "Sir, are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" Marcus shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. "The girl," he managed to say. "Sarah. Where is Sarah?" The officer pointed to the main entrance. "She's safe, sir. The paramedics are already taking care of her." Marcus felt his legs weaken with pure relief. He followed the indicated direction, stepping out into the cold night air. Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, a paramedic checking her vital signs. When she saw Marcus, her eyes filled with tears again. She reached out, and Marcus came to her, embracing her as she sobbed uncontrollably into his shoulder, her whole body trembling with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. "You saved me," she whispered through tears. "You really saved me." Marcus tightened his embrace, feeling his own tears finally escape, running down his face. Decisions made in seconds, courage found in unexpected places, a life saved by someone who was just doing their job. Sarah was rushed to St. Mary's Hospital, just 15 minutes from the school. Paramedics worked on her the entire way, administering intravenous fluids to combat severe dehydration, checking vital signs, and asking gentle questions that she answered in a weak but determined voice. Marcus followed in the police car, unable to leave her alone even for a moment, as if his presence could somehow continue to protect her. At the hospital, doctors ran a full battery of tests. Miraculously, despite the dehydration and malnutrition, Sarah had no serious physical injuries. The psychological trauma, however, would be a much longer journey to heal. While Sarah received medical care, the police investigation unfolded with impressive speed. Detectives searched every inch of that basement, photographing everything, collecting evidence, meticulously documenting the horror that had existed there for days. It was during this search that they made a discovery that transformed the case from an isolated kidnapping into something far more sinister. Inside a box hidden behind old pipes, they found a notebook, pages and pages written in James Brennan's meticulous handwriting, detailing not only his days with Sarah, but also accounts of 3 other young women. Melissa, 17, disappeared from a school in Portland 3 years ago. Jennifer, 16, disappeared from Eugene 2 years earlier. Natalie, 15, disappeared from Bend 18 months ago. The impact of this revelation shook not only the small Oregon community, but the entire state. Sarah wasn't the first, she was the 4th. And unlike the others, she was the only one who had survived. Brennan had built that hideout during his own student years at Roosevelt decades ago, meticulously, anticipating a future use. When he returned as an assistant professor, he had the perfect hideout already waiting for him. The long-term planning mindset, the predatory patience, the ability to maintain a facade of normalcy for so long, all of this revealed a terrifying truth about how predators operate behind the scenes in our communities. The families of Melissa, Jennifer, and Natalie finally got answers after years of agony and uncertainty. They weren't the answers they wanted, but they were answers. Brennan, confronted with overwhelming evidence, eventually confessed to locations where the bodies could be found. 3 families were finally able to bury their daughters. 3 cases filed away, as unexplained runaways or disappearances, were finally solved. And all because a 58-year-old janitor decided to investigate a strange sound instead of ignoring it. The community responded remarkably. Neighbors Sarah barely knew showed up with meals, cards, and offers of help. The school organized counseling sessions for students traumatized by the revelation that a predator had operated among them, without anyone suspecting. Fundraisers sprang up to help with Sarah's medical bills and therapy. And Marcus, the man who had been invisible for 15 years, suddenly found himself in a spotlight he never wanted or asked for. Local and then national newspapers published his photo. "Caretaker hero saves kidnapped teenager," screamed the headlines. Reporters showed up at his door, wanting interviews. The city hall talked about giving him an honorary medal, but Marcus refused almost everything. He gave a single brief interview where he simply said, "I only did what any decent person should do. I saw someone needing help and I helped. I'm not a hero, I'm just someone who paid attention." But the truth, of course, is that he was a hero. Not the kind that appears in movies with explosions and dramatic chases, but the real kind. The kind that exists in split-second decisions. In choosing to act when it would be easier not to. In putting himself in danger to protect someone vulnerable. Marcus's transformation from invisible to unforgettable didn't change who he was inside. He continued doing his job, cleaning the same hallways, locking the same doors. But now the children greeted him by name. Teachers stopped to chat. And every time he saw Sarah in the hallways, because she eventually returned to school, determined not to let Brennan steal anything else from her, they exchanged a nod, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. If you're feeling the weight of this story now, understanding that real heroes walk among us disguised as ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, then you're part of this community that recognizes true courage when it sees it. Subscribe to the channel because the final message of this story will touch something deep within you about the power each of us has to make a difference. 6 months after that night that changed everything, Marcus was in the same basement doing the same routine cleaning, but nothing was truly the same. That secret room had been permanently sealed with concrete. The school had installed additional security cameras in every hallway, every room, every corner where shadows might hide secrets. And Marcus, well, he was still the janitor, but now he carried something different within him. A heightened awareness that vigilance isn't paranoia, it's responsibility. Sarah returned to school. After 3 months of intensive therapy. On the first day, she was visibly nervous, her eyes scanning every hallway as if she expected to see Brennan emerge from some shadow. But he was where he belonged, in a jail cell awaiting trial on 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of murder. He would never again set foot in freedom. Sarah was determined not to let him steal anything more from her. She would graduate from that school. She would live her life. She would go to college. She would become the person she had been prevented from being during those 6 days of horror. Marcus watched her grow in confidence week after week. He saw her start laughing again in the hallways with her friends. He saw her eventually able to walk through the basement without freezing in fear. The healing journey wasn't linear. There were bad days, flashbacks, nightmares, but Sarah was fighting for every inch of normalcy back. And whenever she saw Marcus, she smiled, a genuine smile of gratitude that said more than words ever could. Marcus's story reminds us of something fundamental about heroism that Hollywood never quite manages to capture. Heroes don't wear capes. They wear janitor uniforms, nurses' aprons, teachers' badges, grease-stained work clothes. They are the people you pass by every day without really seeing them, and what makes them heroes isn't superpowers or special training. It's simply the decision to pay attention when something seems wrong, and the courage to act when others would look the other way. Marcus could have ignored that sound. He could have rationalized it as just a rat or the old building settling in. He could have decided it wasn't his problem, that it was the police's job to deal with strange things. But he didn't. He trusted his instincts. He investigated. He acted. And because of that simple but profound choice, Sarah is alive today. You are recovering. You are building the future that was almost stolen from you. 3 other families have had closure. After years of unanswered questions, and a predator that operated freely behind the scenes of society has finally been stopped. So here's the real question, the one that truly matters, now that you know this story. And you? If you're in a situation where something seems wrong, where your instincts are screaming that something strange is happening, where someone might need help but you're not sure, what are you going to do? Are you going to rationalize and move on because it's easier, more comfortable, less complicated? Or are you going to do as Marcus did and investigate, even if it means stepping outside your comfort zone, even if it seems silly, even if you might be wrong? The uncomfortable truth is that predators rely on our tendency to ignore warning signs, to not want to get involved, to assume that someone else will handle it. They build their operations in the spaces between our attention and our action, and they continue to operate until someone like Marcus decides no, not today, not here, not while I can do something about it. The mindset of active surveillance isn't about being paranoid or suspicious of everyone. It's about being present, aware, willing to question when something doesn't seem right. Marcus never sought to be a hero, nor did he want the attention that came afterward. He just wanted to do his job and go home. But when the moment came, when he was tested in a way he never imagined he would be, he didn't hesitate. He did what had to be done. And that perhaps is the most important lesson of all. You don't choose the moments that will define your life, but you choose how you respond to them. And look, if you've made it this far, to this last minute with me, it's because this story has touched you in some way. Maybe it made you think of someone you know, or of a situation you've been through where you had to make a difficult decision. Maybe it simply reminded you that genuine kindness still exists in this world, even in the most unexpected places and among the most unlikely people. If you truly felt the weight of this story, leave a like below. This helps more people discover real stories like this one, which show the best of humanity when all seems lost. And if you want to continue seeing this type of content, stories that restore faith in people, that show real courage in impossible situations, subscribe to the channel now. This is where I bring you these narratives that most places don't tell, these moments of silent heroism that deserve to be recognized. And leave a comment below saying I'm with you until the end, if you really watched the whole thing. I want to know what moment impacted you the most, what you took away from this story, if you've ever been through something similar, or if you know someone who is an unsung hero like Marcus. Your comments create a community here, a space where we can share these important reflections. And look, there's a video right here that you need to see. It's about another moment of unexpected courage, another ordinary person who did something extraordinary. Click and stay with me there, because if this story touched you, the next one will touch you even more deeply. See you there.